Hello, it's John Heaton, and today I'm going to tackle a subject which I don't think I've tackled before, and it's whether politics and music go together. I would say straight off the bat, in general, I would say they don't go too well together, but there are some exceptions, which I will highlight at the end. I've picked out 12 occasions where I think they do work well together, and I'll mention a few which perhaps is not the case. Just before I start, what's the definition of politics? Well, I took it kind of in the wider sense of the word, meaning not just left wing, right wing, but and things like environmental change and pushing for racial harmony or justice. That kind of thing would come under politics under my definition for this video. And one looks to the Gilbert and Sullivan operas from more than 100 years ago in the late 19th century. They were making fun of the church and the politicians and the House of Lords and businessmen and everything in quite a sort of light-hearted manner, so nothing vindictive, with a lot of humour. So taking the mickey out of politics has been around for donkey's years, and I think it actually benefits the song if it's got either some humour in it or is sufficiently generic, not sort of pointing the finger at one individual, sort of a more sort of general criticism or critique. So that's just a bit of an introduction. Just before I come on to the ones which I've chosen as my favourites, I'm just going to mention a few honourable mentions. Elvis Costello had two songs from his album Spike, which was released in the late 80s, both of which were pretty direct attacks on Margaret Thatcher. I remember them well to this day when I bought the album and reading the lyrics on the back. This Town, the opening track, contains the line, we all think you're a bastard, I think, and then Tramp the Dirt Down was literally saying, when you die, I'm going to tramp the dirt down on your grave. So it's pretty harsh stuff, and he was entitled to his opinion. But as I say, I think if you're that specific about your target, it tends to date the song a little bit. And I think the ones which have lasted the test of time tend to be more kind of general criticism or general commentary. Anyway, another one I'd like to mention is Supertramp Fool's Overture, which is quite a general criticism of something or other, but I've never quite managed to work out what it's a criticism of, because on the front cover of Even in the Quietest Moments, it's the Star-Spangled Banner. So it is a criticism. Is it a criticism of American history or foreign policy? And Winston Churchill's in there being quoted. Is it a criticism of him or war in general? I guess it's probably the latter, but it's a little bit vague in its target, so I didn't include that in my favourites, but it's obviously a brilliant song. George Harrison did a very effective political song called Save the World, which he donated to Greenpeace later with a different version, and that's a very effective song talking about saving the whale and the danger of nuclear weapons. And earlier on in his career, George Harrison had obviously famously written Taxman with the Beatles, and that could be considered a political song because the Labour government at the time were taxing all the top earners 98% of their income. So although one could argue that that still left them with a whole load of money compared to the rest of society, but George took umbrage at that punitive tax rate and wrote a song about it. John Lennon famously, I'll come on to what I think worked well for him politically, but in the early 70s he went through a very radical phase where he was sort of joining forces with Jerry Rubin and Abbie Hoffman and getting pretty pro, sort of not pro-terrorism but pro-radical causes, and certainly pro the cause of Ireland on Sometime in New York City, which is the album I'm talking about. There's a 2 or 3 songs which have mentioned the plight of Ireland in the light of the recent troubles and their troubled history, of course, which works quite well. But it's, as I say, it's a little bit too specific to make the songs last, and I think that's true of most of that album. A more successful attempt at that from John was the previous year, 71 single Power to the People, which is a pretty justified and good song about workers' rights and stuff like that. Wings rarely were political, but they did release Give Ireland Back to the Irish, and it's a little bit of a blot on their catalogue, if one's honest, but it was honest feeling at the time after Bloody Sunday. It's not a very good song, unfortunately, so that didn't make my list, but it's a worthy, heartfelt effort. Leonard Cohen, I was thinking of including one of his, but I couldn't work out whether some of his songs were just about sort of life in general, or spirituality, or death, or whether they were aimed at sort of wider society problems. And I'm thinking of a track like Closing Time. I nearly included that, but then I did some reading up on it, and I don't think it is about the world's coming to an end. It's more kind of life is coming to an end. So I could have included some of Neil Young's songs. For example, Ohio is a very famous song he did early on in his career about the ongoing troubles and war in the world, in America involved in particular. Roger Waters, well, he's going to feature in my top 12, but he's been writing political lyrics all of his life, and I think he's, for the most part, more successful when he's more generic, like on Dark Side of the Moon, whereas on something like The Final Cut, it's very much aimed at individuals. For example, he mentions Reagan and Haig and Thatcher and Paisley and all these people who he hates every one of them. He seems to hate all politicians. And I'm talking about the song The Fletcher Memorial Home, and the rather unpleasant end to that song. Are you having a nice time? Now the final solution can be applied, which is pretty nasty connotations of what happened in World War II. But anyway, I won't comment any further on that. So the stuff on Final Cut, less successful. The Wall is, Roger always says it's a parody of fascism, and it probably is, but it could be easily misunderstood, and I think as a result it's not that the lyrics of that album haven't lasted the test of time quite so well, because they do tend to get misunderstood, especially the stuff on side 4 when he's addressing the rally. Anyway, we'll come on to what Roger did really well in terms of political statements, in my opinion, apart from Dark Side of the Moon, which doesn't feature in my top 12, but that could be considered a political statement as well. Bob Dylan, well, he's going to feature in my top 12, but there's many other songs I could have chosen, particularly early on in his career. The Times They Are A-Changing, With God on Their Side, Masters of War, all classic early political statements from Dylan. And then Michael Jackson's Earth Song is a heartfelt plea for environmental, save the planet kind of thing, with a wonderful video with the trees, with the tall trees being cut down and stuff. That very nearly made my top 12. And there's a song by the Specials called Free Nelson Mandela, which again could have easily made my top 12, because it's a very famous song from the sort of mid-80s, just before Nelson Mandela was released. And unfortunately it's just not a brilliant song, so it didn't make the list. But anyway, where are we? So we're going to come to my top 12 in reverse order. I'm going to start off with a track from The Police, from Ghosts in the Machine, and it's a track called Invisible Sun, which actually was a single from this album. Did reasonably well, but it doesn't really get talked about much among Police's greatest hits, but it's a very dark song, and it's basically he was about the time that they spent in Belfast. I think a couple of the members of the band spent quite a lot of time in Belfast growing up when they were younger, and obviously it was fairly bleak times, and they were saying there must be an invisible sun to keep us going, to give us hope when the day is done. And I think it's a very heartfelt song, and Sting should be applauded for that song. Number 11, I'm going to go for a humorous song from Night Flight to Venus from Boney M, and it's Rasputin, where completely irreverent lyrics about Rasputin and lover of the Russian queen, here was a cat that really was gone, and it's just hilarious. And there's a hilarious video where they do their sort of Russian dance, and they kind of hated it too much in Russia, because they invited Boney M to Moscow, and they're famously filmed outside the Kremlin in their white costumes, and I think they played a couple of concerts there, so I'm not positive that they played Rasputin, but I guess they did. Anyone knows, let me know. But I thought it's a pretty hilarious so-called political song, but with humour. And at the end, when Bobby goes, "Oh, those Russians," classic. A bit unfortunate given today's events, but anyway, a fun song for the late 70s. Number 10, we've got. I'm going to choose "Hurricane" from Desire, the opening track from Desire, 1976, where Bob Dylan is pleading the innocence of Rubin Carter, who was a boxer who was tipped to be heavyweight champion. Sorry, I think it was middleweight champion of the world, and he got accused of murder, and Bob's pleading his innocence, saying that the trial was rigged, and they're very effective words, and couldn't help make me feel ashamed to live in a land where justice is a game. That's just one line from it. And wonderfully fluid lyrics throughout that song, and there's a great version of him performing it live on YouTube with Scarlett on the violin, which is worth checking out as well. So that's "Hurricane" from 76 from Dylan. Number 9, we're going to choose "Happy Birthday" from Stevie Wonder, which you might think, well, is that a political song? But yes, it is, because it's a full-scale tribute to Martin Luther King, recorded 12 years after Martin Luther King's assassination, and pleading for a national holiday in his honour. Very heartfelt lyrics. Anyone who takes offence at a day in your celebration, you can't understand it. And so let's have a world party on the day you came to be. Happy birthday. And it's a wonderfully uplifting song, and Martin Luther King would have been very happy to have heard it, had he been alive, but obviously he wasn't. So number 8, I'm going to go for "Street Fighting Man," which was originally on Beggar's Banquet, but it also turned up on "Through the Past Darkly," which is a compilation from '69 from the Stones. And it's a wonderfully evocative song of that era, because if you read up on that era, in '68, it was the time for kind of riots in the streets in America and in Europe, in France and in Czech Republic, and Mick singing, "What can a poor boy do except for play in a rock and roll band, because in sleepy London town there's no place for a street fighting man." And it's kind of basically saying, if I go to the streets and protest, it's probably not going to end well. So I might as well just join a rock and roll band. I'm not quite sure. I haven't read up too much on the meaning of the lyrics, but it's very reflective of that era. And I suppose you could say "Sympathy for the Devil" is a political song, but I would say that was altogether more negative, the message it sends out, and might have led indirectly to some of the events later on, like Altamont. But anyway, that's a different topic. Number 7, I'm going to go with "Revolution" from the Beatles. I just think it's clever the way Lennon sort of sits on the fence in a way, but on the whole, I think he came out against destruction and against tearing everything down. If you read interviews throughout his career, he's saying, okay, well, the revolutionists want to tear everything down and destroy everything, but then what are you going to replace it with? You've got to think a bit more strategically, and I think he was sort of aiming to make the change can come from within society rather than just smashing everything up. If each individual has change in their hearts and in their minds, you can get somewhere. And there's lines like, if you want money for people with minds that hate, all I can tell you is, brother, you have to wait. So basically he's saying, if I want to see it with flowers, not with guns. I know in the early 70s he kind of changed his tune a bit, but I think that by the time he died, he'd come full circle and had realised that this was the best way. Number 6, I'm going to choose a song by the Specials, and this is their greatest hits, because this song, "Ghost Town," was not on an album, but it's a superb single from 1981. And it's round about the time of sort of the early Thatcher government, and there was high unemployment, and there was riots in the streets in Brixton and Toxteth in Liverpool. And so the Specials came up with this song, "This Town is Nothing But a Ghost Town. Bands don't play no more." And they were just filmed driving around in a car in this deserted town for the video. Very effective and just very evocative of that era. So that's why I've chosen it in the top 10. It's at number 6. Number 5, I'm going to choose "Animals" from Pink Floyd, and I couldn't really choose one track. I just think the whole album works well as a commentary on should we say, the stupidity of man, or the tendency of mankind to just follow each other like sheep, or get sucked in by a power game. And there's digs at a whole sort of different aspects of society, but not aimed at individuals. Whereas more recently, Roger Waters has kind of pointed the finger at Donald Trump, for example. On this album, he's basically keeping it more generic, and I think that's what makes it timeless. It could even make it his best album of all time, lyrically anyway. And as a band, Pink Floyd would struggle to beat that album, in my opinion. Although probably Dave Gilmour doesn't agree. But anyway, it happens to be my favourite Pink Floyd album. Number 4, we're going to go with Imagine from John Lennon, which some people say, well, that's not a political song, is it? Yeah, well, it actually is, with kind of strings making it sound sweet. As Lennon said, for conservatives like yourself, when he's addressed to McCartney, you think Imagine ain't political? It's a Plastic Ono Band with sugar on it for conservatives like yourself. Anyway, if you read the lyrics, it's not quite a communist manifesto, but it's a kind of utopian manifesto. And it's not saying this is the answer, it's just saying imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do, nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too. I don't necessarily think he was saying it's a good thing for countries to be abolished, but he was just saying imagine what it would be like. Because I was just reading, when I was one of the books on Gilbert and Sullivan, back in their time in the 1880s, when Gilbert and Sullivan travelled to America, they didn't even need a passport. You could just go there on the ship, and people could walk around and not have to show papers in order to go across borders. So you could argue, whether things are better now or worse, but I thought that was quite interesting. I think Imagine's just a tour de force, and sufficiently generic, and it's been appreciated in different languages and translated into different languages. That's the sign of a good song, as is the next one, Where Have All the Flowers Gone, which is originally a Pete Seeger song, but I got familiar with it through Peter, Paul and Mary, this box set, which is superb, by the way, good value. It's like 5 discs and it wasn't that expensive. Lovely harmonies from Peter, Paul and Mary, and Where Have All the Flowers Gone, and they just go through all the verses. Start off with, the young girls have picked them every one, and then where have all the young girls gone? They've gone to husbands, gone and picked husbands every one. Where have all the husbands gone? They've gone to become soldiers every one. Where have all the soldiers gone? They've gone to graveyards every one. Where have all the graveyards gone? They've gone to flowers every one. And then where have the flowers gone? The young girls have picked them again. So it comes full circle, and it's very moving. And my Hungarian grandmother had heard this song in German and loved it, so we talked about that with me speaking my pidgin Hungarian and trying to make each other understood. But my point is that song is appreciated not just in English, but certainly in German, and I'm pretty sure in other languages throughout the world. It's just a timeless song about the futility of war, not saying all war is unnecessary, or all war is unnecessary, but certainly when war does happen, the losers tend to be all the soldiers who just go and fight for a so-called cause and end up dead. So it's a timeless message. Number 2 is, I'm going to choose Blowing in the Wind, originally from Freewheeling album 1963, but Blowing in the Wind was performed superbly on the Concert for Bangladesh with George Harrison and friends, when Bob came on towards the end of the concert and did 5 songs, just solo on the guitar, backed with on a couple of them with George Harrison and Leon Russell and Ringo, just sort of Ringo tapping percussion, Leon Russell on bass and George on guitar, and very effective songs. And Peter, Paul and Mary also do a brilliant version of Blowing in the Wind, which I think was a sizable hit actually in the singles charts in America. Just wonderful lyrics. I've got this lyric book, Bob Dylan, in English and Hungarian, but they don't give you all of the verses. But anyway, how many times must a man look up before he can see the sky? Yes, and how many ears must one man have before he can hear people cry? How many deaths will it take till he knows that too many people have died? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. Timeless song for any age, and number one, I'm also going to choose Dylan again, and It's a Hard Rain's Gonna Fall. And that was also performed on Concert for Bangladesh, although it comes from the Freewheeling album again. And just wonderful lyrics. In this particular book, they've only got 2 verses. No, they haven't. I just do it a disservice. They've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They've got 5 verses, which probably might be the whole song. I'll just read out one verse. What did you see, my blue-eyed son? What did you see, my darling young one? I've stumbled on the side of 12 misty mountains. I've walked and I've crawled on 6 crooked highways. I've stepped in the middle of 7 sad forests. I've been out in front of a dozen dead oceans. I've been 10,000 miles in the mouth of a graveyard, and it's a hard, and it's a hard, and it's a hard, and it's a hard rain's gonna fall. So he's basically saying, you know, that this was 1963, where the world was pretty scared that there was going to be a nuclear war. It was very shortly after the Cuban Missile Crisis, and the Russia and the USSR and America were sort of, all, you know, coming pretty close to a nuclear war, and it was quite a scary time. And I just like the way the words are kind of, they keep it general, so you can even apply those lyrics to today. You know, I've gone back out before the rain starts a-falling. Sorry, I'm going back out before the rain starts a-falling. I walk to the depths of the deepest black forest, where the people are many and their hands are all empty, where the pellets of poison are flooding their waters, where the home in the valley meets the damned dirty prison, where the executioner's face is always well hidden, where hunger is ugly, where souls are forgotten, where black is the colour and none is the number. And I'll tell it and think it and speak it and breathe it, and reflect it from the mountain so all souls can see it. Then I'll stand on the ocean until I start sinking. But I'll know my song well before I start singing. And it's a hard, and it's a hard, and it's a hard rain's gonna fall. Just absolutely brilliant song. So that was my 12 songs where I think it does work to mix music and politics. I can think of many others where it hasn't worked, and in general, musicians do tend to steer clear of politics, but on some occasions things need to be said, and it works. So thank you for watching that, and we'll see you next time.